A heart once soft can quickly turn into a blade of cold, hard iron when pushed to the breaking point. Witness the sharp edge of revenge as it cuts through the lies and settles the final score. Click subscribe now to see the ultimate price of a broken promise. They told me to get out of the car. My daughter said it with a smile on her face, standing in her driveway in her expensive shoes, looking at me like I was a stranger who had knocked on the wrong door. That moment changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, because the beginning is where you'll understand how a 63-year-old man ended up with nothing but a duffel bag and a doctor's bill he couldn't pay. My name is Gerald. I worked for 31 years as a shift supervisor at a paper mill outside of Dayton, Ohio. I wasn't rich. I wasn't poor. I had a house on Clover Street, a truck I kept running with my own two hands, and a wife named Miriam who made the best peach cobbler in Montgomery County. We weren't the kind of people who took vacations to Europe or drove new cars off the lot, but we had enough. And enough felt like everything. Miriam passed in the spring of 2022. Pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to the end was 11 weeks. 11 weeks to say everything you should have been saying for 40 years. I held her hand in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee, and I told her things I had never said out loud before, and she smiled at me with those tired eyes and said, "Gerald, I already knew." That was Miriam. She always already knew. After she was gone, the house on Clover Street became a different place. The walls were the same, the furniture was the same, but the air had changed. It was too still. I'd come home from wherever I'd been and stand in the kitchen and listen to nothing and realize that nothing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My daughter, Stephanie, lived 40 minutes away in Centerville with her husband Derek and their two kids. She called me every Sunday for the first few months. Then every other Sunday. Then I noticed I was the one calling, and I noticed she always sounded like I had interrupted something important. I told myself she was busy. She had a life. That's what children are supposed to do, build lives. I didn't want to be the kind of father who made his grief his daughter's problem. But then the mill announced layoffs. 31 years, and they handed me a folder with some paperwork and a handshake and a number to call if I had questions about my severance. I had questions. The number rang twice and went to voicemail. I never did get a call back. So there I was, 61 years old, no job, no wife, a mortgage I could cover for maybe 8 months if I was careful. I called Stephanie on a Tuesday evening. I explained the situation calmly. I wasn't asking to move in. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking if she knew anyone hiring, if she had any connections through Derek's firm, if maybe I could stay in their guest room for a few weeks while I figured things out. She said she would talk to Derek and call me back. She called back 4 days later. Derek, she said, was under a lot of stress at work. The kids had their schedules. The guest room was actually being used as a home office now. She was sorry. She really was. But the timing just wasn't great. I said I understood. I told her not to worry about it. I hung up the phone and sat at Miriam's kitchen table and stared at the fruit bowl she had kept filled her entire life, and that I had kept filled since she died, because I didn't know how to stop doing the things that reminded me of her. There were 3 oranges in it. I stared at those oranges for a long time. I sold the house in August. Took less than it was worth because I needed it done fast. Paid off what I owed. After everything settled, I had enough to rent a room at an extended stay motel on the east side of Dayton called the Sunnyside Inn, which was neither sunny nor particularly inn-like. It was clean enough. The woman at the front desk, Rosa, was kind. She always said good morning like she meant it. I found work at a grocery distribution warehouse on the night shift, loading and unloading pallets, checking manifests, moving boxes of things that other people would buy and take home to their families. The pay was modest, but it was steady. My knees didn't love me for it. Neither did my back. But I showed up every night, and I did the work, and I didn't complain, because complaining didn't get boxes on pallets. The bus that ran between the Sunnyside Inn and the warehouse stopped at 9 p.m. My shift started at 10. The first week I walked the 2.5 miles. The second week, my left knee swelled up so badly I could barely lace my boot. That's when I met Carl. Carl Hutchins drove a delivery truck for a regional food supplier. He was 57, built like a man who had spent 30 years carrying heavy things, with a gray beard and the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest and arrived without any warning. He had taken to stopping at the Sunnyside Inn parking lot around 9:45 most nights to eat whatever his wife had packed him before he headed to his overnight route. He saw me limping down the access road in the dark and pulled up alongside me. "You going to the warehouse?" he asked. I told him I was. "Get in," he said. I pass right by it. That was the beginning of it. He started timing his break to coincide with my walk. Every night. He never made a big thing of it. He'd pull up, I'd get in, we'd talk for 10 minutes about baseball or the price of fuel or whatever was on the radio, and then he'd drop me at the warehouse entrance and head on his way. I started packing 2 cups of coffee in a thermos. He started leaving the engine running so the cab was warm when I climbed in. It went on like that for 2 months. I told him about Miriam. He told me about his son who had moved to Portland and called on birthdays if he remembered. We were 2 men who had been left with more space than they needed and had learned to fill it with work and routine. We understood each other without having to explain very much. I told him about Stephanie one night. Not everything, just enough. That she lived 40 minutes away. That she had a guest room. That the timing hadn't been great. Carl was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I've noticed about people who say the timing isn't great? It's always great for them, just not for you." I didn't answer that, but I thought about it for weeks. Thanksgiving came. I worked the night before and slept through most of the morning. Stephanie called around noon. She said they were doing dinner at Derek's parents' house this year. It was a whole thing, a lot of people. She hoped I understood. Maybe we could do something the weekend after. I said, of course. We never did anything the weekend after. In December, my back gave out completely. I slipped on ice in the warehouse parking lot at the end of a shift, went down hard, and spent 2 days unable to stand up straight. The motel room was small enough that I could lean from the bed to the wall without much trouble, which was the only good thing about it. Rosa brought me soup from the diner across the street. She didn't ask to be thanked for it. She just left it outside the door and knocked twice. That was when I found out about the money. It came out gradually, the way bad news usually does. After Miriam died, I had handled everything: the funeral arrangements, the estate, the small savings account she kept under her own name, or I thought I had. What I didn't know, because Miriam had handled the family finances the way she handled most things, quietly and without involving me until it was necessary, was that she had a secondary account. Not hidden exactly, just separate. An account she had been putting money into for 30 years in small amounts. A disciplined, patient kind of saving that was entirely Miriam. I found out about it from our accountant, Bob Ferraro, who called me while I was lying on the motel room bed with a heating pad under my spine. He had been going through the final estate paperwork and found a discrepancy. The account existed, but it had been emptied. Not by me. The withdrawal records showed a series of transactions beginning 3 weeks after Miriam's diagnosis, when she had still been well enough to have conversations but had been on enough medication that her judgment wasn't what it normally was. Someone had gotten power of attorney, had helped her sign documents while she was in that condition, had moved the money $47,000 in small increments to avoid flags. Bob read me the name on the power of attorney. I asked him to read it again. It was Stephanie. I lay there on that motel bed with the heating pad humming and the ceiling 1 arm's length above me, and I felt something shift inside me that I don't have a precise word for. It wasn't anger, exactly, though anger came later. It was more like the feeling of standing on ground you trusted completely and watching it change under your feet. Like the world had quietly revised itself while you weren't paying attention and no one had bothered to tell you. I called Stephanie. She didn't answer. I left a message. I said I had spoken to Bob and I needed to talk to her. I kept my voice level. I had learned from Miriam that the moments when you most want to shout are the moments when you most need to be still. She called back 2 hours later. She said Mom had wanted her to have it. She said Mom had been worried about me being irresponsible with money. She said it had been a private arrangement between her and Mom, and that I wouldn't understand the full picture. She said this in the same tone she had used when she told me the timing wasn't great, that practiced careful distance, like she was explaining a policy to someone who worked for her. I asked her if she understood that what she was describing was a crime. She said she was going to have to call me back. She didn't call back. I called her the following week, and the week after that. I drove to Centerville on a Saturday in January. 40 minutes down I-75, exit 44. 3 turns I had made 100 times since she moved into that house. I pulled into the driveway behind Derek's Audi and knocked on the front door. Derek answered. He said Stephanie wasn't home. He said it looking directly at me. I heard her voice inside the house talking to one of the kids, 30 feet behind him. I said, "Tell her I was here." He said he would. He closed the door. I sat in my truck in their driveway for 4 minutes. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the clock on the dashboard. Then I backed out and drove away, because I didn't know what else to do, and because doing something rash would not bring back $47,000, or the version of my daughter I thought I knew. Bob referred me to an attorney. The attorney said the case was complicated by the fact that Miriam had signed the documents voluntarily, even if her capacity was questionable. She said pursuing it would take time and money and might not result in recovery of the full amount. She said I should document everything. I said I would. I drove back to the Sunnyside Inn and packed my thermos and walked out to the parking lot at 9:40 and waited for Carl. He was late that night, almost 10 minutes late, which had never happened. When he pulled up, his face was different, something tight around the eyes. He reached across and unlocked the passenger door, but he didn't say anything until I was in and the door was shut. "Gerald," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm when I hear it, because I need you to hear all of it before you react." I said, "Okay." Last Thursday I made a delivery to a restaurant supply company off Springboro Pike. When I was unloading in the back, 2 men came out to the loading dock to smoke. They didn't notice me. I recognized one of them. "It was your son-in-law." I said I understood. I asked him what Derek had been doing at a restaurant supply company. Carl was quiet for a moment. "He wasn't there for restaurant supplies. The other man had a folder. I heard them talking about a property, a house on Clover Street." I felt the blood drop out of my face. "That's my house," I said. "I sold that house." "I know you did," Carl said. "I know you told me about it. That's why I remembered. Because the man with the folder was talking about the new development going in. Gerald, they're putting a commercial plaza on that whole block. The city approved the permits in November. Your house, that whole row, is worth 4 times what you sold it for to the development group. And Derek's name is on the LLC that brokered the sale." I heard what he was saying. I heard every word. But my brain kept sliding off it, the way your eyes slide off something too bright to look at directly. Derek had known about the development. He had known when Stephanie told me the timing wasn't great. He had known when she didn't call back after the power of attorney conversation. They had needed me gone from that house, and they had needed the estate settled quickly, and they had needed me to have no idea what the land was worth. Carl put the truck in park. He turned to look at me. "I don't know if this changes anything," he said. "I don't know what you can do with it, but I thought you deserved to know." I sat there for a long time. The warehouse could wait. My shift could wait. I sat in Carl's truck in the dark parking lot of the Sunnyside Inn, and outside the window the sign flickered the way it always did after 10 p.m., and I thought about Miriam sitting at the kitchen table doing the budget every month with a yellow legal pad, the way she had done it for 40 years, quietly and without fanfare, building something she believed was for us. I called the attorney the next morning. I told her about the LLC. I told her about Derek. I told her to find out everything she could about the development deal timeline, and when the permits were filed, and whether there was any overlap with the estate proceedings. She called me back 3 days later with a different tone in her voice. She said there was overlap. She said there was significant overlap. She said I should come in. What followed took 7 months. I won't compress it into something tidy because it wasn't. It was depositions and document requests and Stephanie crying in a hallway outside a conference room in a way that I am not sure was entirely genuine, and Derek sitting across a table from me with an attorney beside him looking at his hands. It was nights when I couldn't sleep, and mornings when I didn't want to get up, and phone calls with Bob Ferraro, who had become something like a friend through all of it. It was Carl picking me up every night and asking how I was holding up and listening without offering advice he hadn't been asked for. The estate account was recovered. The attorney found enough documentary evidence of undue influence during Miriam's final weeks that Stephanie's claim to the power of attorney dissolved. The LLC situation was more complex, but Derek's firm settled rather than let it go to litigation, and the settlement was not a small number. I didn't celebrate when it was over. I sat in Rose's little office at the Sunnyside Inn, the same office where she had checked me in 20 months before, and she poured 2 cups of coffee from her personal maker, and we sat and drank them without saying much. Because sometimes the end of something hard doesn't call for noise, it calls for quiet. I didn't hear from Stephanie for 3 months after the settlement. When she finally called, I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail, and kept letting it go every time after that. But I answered, because I am still her father even on the days I don't entirely want to be. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I'll give her credit for that. She didn't have an explanation that was meant to make me feel better. She said, "Dad, I knew what we were doing and I told myself enough lies about it that I believed them. I don't expect you to understand that. I just wanted you to know that I know." I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, "Your mother would have wanted me to leave that door open, so I'm leaving it open. But Stephanie, you have to do the walking." She said she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. That part of the story is still being written, and I don't know its ending. What I do know is that I'm not at the Sunnyside Inn anymore. I found a two-bedroom apartment on the north side of Dayton, not far from the park where Miriam and I used to walk on Sunday mornings. My knees still complain about the warehouse, but I work a day shift now with slightly more reasonable hours. On Friday evenings, Carl parks his truck in my lot after his route ends, and we sit on the small porch I have with 2 cups of coffee and whatever game is on the radio. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we just sit. He fixed my screen door last month without being asked, and I made him a sandwich. And he ate it without making a comment about it, and that is the kind of thing that tells you everything about a person. I used to think that family was defined by blood, and that what was outside that circle was something less. Miriam knew better. Miriam used to say that love isn't something you inherit, it's something you choose every single day by showing up. I thought she meant it about marriage. I understand now she meant it about everything. Carl showed up. In a parking lot at 9:45 at night with a warm cab and no expectation of anything in return. He showed up and kept showing up, and that, in the end, is a sentence that not everyone in my life can say. I keep a fruit bowl on the kitchen counter. 3 oranges, usually. Sometimes an apple if I remember to buy one. It's a small thing, but small things are how you keep the people you love present in the rooms where you still have to live. If you're watching this and there's someone in your life who keeps showing up, who asks nothing and gives quietly, I hope you know what you have. And I hope you tell them. Because the ones who stay when you have nothing left to offer are the ones who were never there for what you had. They were there for you.